Dr. Lisa Martinez pressed her headphones tighter against her ears and frowned at the strange patterns dancing across her computer screen. For 3 weeks, the exploration ship Aurora Dawn had been picking up these weird signals from space. Most of her crewmates thought it was just random noise from some dead star, but Lisa knew better. She was a xenolinguist, someone who studied alien languages, and these signals had something that random noise never had. They had rhythm. Computer, play the signal again, she said softly. The bridge was quiet at this hour, with only the night shift on duty. Captain Jake Sullivan was probably asleep, and the rest of the science team wouldn't be up for another 4 hours. But Lisa couldn't sleep. These signals were calling to her. The sound filled her small workstation. It wasn't like any music she knew, but it wasn't just noise either. There were patterns, repetitions, and something that almost sounded like a melody. She had been a musician before becoming a scientist, playing piano in small clubs to pay for college. Her trained ear could hear things that others miss. "Lisa, you're still up?" Dr. Amy Chun walked over with a cup of coffee in her hands. Amy was the ship's cultural expert and one of Lisa's few friends on the long journey to the outer systems. "Still working on those signals? Amy, listen to this." Lisa played the recording again. "Tell me what you hear." Amy sat down and closed her eyes. She listened for almost 10 minutes before opening them again. "It's organized. Like music, but not like any music I've ever heard. The patterns are too complex for human minds to create naturally." "Exactly." Lisa pulled up another screen showing wave patterns. "Look at these frequency changes. They're not random. Someone or something is making these sounds on purpose." Before Amy could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed as Captain Sullivan's voice came over the speakers. "All hands to stations. We have multiple contacts approaching fast. This is not a drill." Lisa and Amy ran too. The bridge, where they found chaos. The main screen showed dozens of strange ships moving toward them. The ships looked like they were made of crystal and light, beautiful but definitely not human. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Ryan Park from the communication station, "I'm getting massive energy readings from those ships. They're singing." "What? Do you mean singing?" Captain Sullivan asked. "The signals Dr. Martinez has been studying. They're coming from those ships, but now they're much stronger. It's like a whole choir." Lisa rushed to the communication station and plugged in her equipment. The bridge filled with the alien sounds, but now they were so much more complex. It was definitely music, but unlike anything Earth had ever produced. The sounds seemed to flow like water, but ring like bells at the same time. "Captain," Lisa said quickly, "I think they're trying to communicate. This isn't just music. It's their language." The alien ships stopped moving when they reached a distance of about 10 miles. Then something amazing happened. The largest ship, which looked like a giant crystal cathedral floating in space, began to glow brighter. The music changed, becoming simpler, more repetitive. "They're trying to talk to us," Amy whispered. Captain Sullivan was a military man, but he was also smart enough to listen to his experts. "Lisa, can you respond to them?" "I can try, but I don't know their language yet." "Let me ... Lisa thought fast. Music was math, and math was universal. She quickly programmed the computer to send back simple mathematical sequences as musical notes. Prime numbers first, then basic addition, then the Fibonacci sequence. The response was immediate. The alien music changed, becoming excited. They sent back more complex mathematical music, and Lisa could hear something like joy in the patterns. "Contact established," she announced. "They understand math, and they can express it as music." Over. The next few hours, Lisa and the aliens worked together to build a basic communication system. It was slow work, but gradually she began to understand. The aliens called themselves something that translated roughly to song people or harmony. Makers. Their leader had a name that sounded like music itself, something Lisa wrote down as Velthara. But as Lisa learned more about their language, She also learned something disturbing. The aliens kept using concepts that seemed to mean pure sound and noisemakers. When they referred to humans, they used the term for noisemakers. "Captain," Lisa said after several hours of work, "I think we have a problem. They don't seem to think very highly of us. They keep calling us noisemakers. And that doesn't seem to be a compliment in their culture." Amy had been helping by analyzing the cultural patterns in the music. "Lisa, I think their entire society is based on musical harmony. Perfect musical harmony. They might see our normal speech as just ugly noise." Captain Sullivan rubbed his tired eyes. "So what do they want?" Before Lisa could answer, the alien communication changed. Velthara was sending more complex patterns now. Patterns that Lisa was beginning to understand meant something like a challenge or test. "Sir, I think they want to test us somehow. The pattern suggests ... musical ability. They seem to think that a species' worth is measured by their musical skills." "That's ridiculous," muttered engineer Pedro Gonzalez, who had been listening from his station. "Music is just entertainment." But Amy looked worried. "Not to them, Pedro. If their whole society is based on music, then to them, beings who can't make proper music might be ... worthless." The alien ships began moving again, but slowly. They were taking positions around the Aurora Dawn, not threatening, but definitely surrounding them. "Captain," Lisa said urgently, "I think they're going to test us. If we fail, I don't think they'll let us leave." Sullivan made a decision that would change everything. "Lisa, what do we have on this ship that might count as music to them?" Lisa thought quickly. The Aurora Dawn wasn't a pleasure cruise. It was an exploration vessel with a crew of scientists and military personnel. "But, sir, I have some recordings in my personal files. Music from Earth, and some of the crew play instruments as hobbies. Get everything we have," Sullivan ordered. "If they want to hear human music, then by God, we'll give them a concert they'll never forget." As Lisa rushed to gather every piece of music on the ship, she couldn't help but think about a street performance she had seen just before leaving Earth. A young woman playing violin while a man played saxophone, both of them making beautiful music together on a busy corner. People had stopped to listen, dropping coins and smiling. It had been simple, honest, and beautiful. Maybe that was what humanity could offer these musical aliens. Not perfection, but heart. Not rigid harmony, but the kind of music that made people stop on the street and smile. The fate of humanity might depend on a song. Captain Jake Sullivan stood in the meeting room with his senior staff, watching Lisa work at her computer. She had been talking with the aliens for 6 hours straight, and her face was pale with exhaustion. But she kept going because everyone on the ship knew their lives depended on what she learned. "Talk to me, Lisa," Sullivan said. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Lisa rubbed her eyes and looked up from her screen. "It's worse than we thought, Captain. Much worse. These aliens, the ones who call themselves the Harmony Makers, they don't just love music. They use it to decide which species get to live and which ones die." Amy Chun leaned forward in her chair. "What do you mean?" "They've done this before, many times." Lisa's voice was shaking slightly. "Velthara has been telling me about something they call the resonance trials. It's a test they give to every new species they meet. If a species can prove they understand true harmony, they get to join the galactic community. If they fail ... double quotes, Lisa didn't finish the sentence. They destroy them," Sullivan said quietly. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, sir." Velthara called it removing discord from the universe. They believe that species who can't make proper music are a threat to cosmic harmony. They've wiped out 17 different civilizations over the past 1,000 years. Dr. Amy Chun felt sick. 17 entire species killed because they couldn't pass a music test. "It gets worse," Lisa continued. "The species that do pass, that get accepted into their galactic community, they have to give up their own music. They're forced to only play Harmony Maker songs. Velthara showed me recordings of these other aliens, and they all sound exactly the same now, like they've lost their souls. Engineer Pedro Gonzalez, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. So either we die, or we become musical slaves. Great options. Lieutenant Ryan Park was working at his communication station, monitoring the alien ships. Captain, I'm picking up more signals. The aliens are talking to each other, and the music is getting more complex. I think they're preparing something. Sullivan turned to Lisa. How long do we have? Velthara said the trials begin when the Harmony Council arrives. That should be in about 12 hours. They're bringing ships from other worlds to witness our test. Amy was thinking hard. Lisa, you said other species either failed completely or had to give up their own music. Has any species ever found a third option? Not according to Velthara. She seems genuinely confused when I ask about compromise or working together. Their whole culture is about absolute harmony, perfect order. The idea of mixing different musical styles seems impossible to them. Sullivan made his decision. Then we'll have to show them something they've never seen before. Pedro, I need you to find every crew member who plays an instrument. Amy, start going through our cultural database. I want every type of human music we have. Lisa, keep talking to them, but don't give away our plans. As the crew scattered to their tasks, Sullivan couldn't help but think about his own childhood. He had grown up in New Orleans, where jazz was born from the mixing of African rhythms, European harmonies, and American blues. His grandmother had always said that the best music came from bringing different sounds together, not keeping them apart. Maybe that was humanity's strength, thought Pedro came back 2 hours later with a list of crew members. Captain, we've got more musicians than I expected. Dr. Claire Thompson plays violin. She learned classical music as a child. Tony Williams from the engine room plays saxophone. He was in a jazz band back on Earth. Maya Johnson from security plays guitar and sings. And Lieutenant Park actually plays piano, though he's shy about it. Good. Get them all together. We need to start practicing. Amy had been busy with the computer databases. Captain, I've been studying human music history, and I think I understand what makes us different from these aliens. Every human musical tradition has been influenced by others. Jazz came from mixing African and European music. Rock and roll mixed country with blues. Even classical music changed as composers learned from each other. While these harmony makers seem to have kept their music pure and unchanged for thousands of years, Lisa added, Velthara is actually proud of the fact that their songs today sound exactly like their songs from 1,000 years ago. Sullivan nodded. So they value perfection and purity. We value growth and change. The crew spent the next few hours gathering in the ship's main cargo bay, which had the best acoustics. Dr. Claire Thompson had her violin, a beautiful instrument that had belonged to her grandmother. Tony Williams brought his saxophone, which he had played in small clubs across Earth. Maya Johnson had her guitar, an old acoustic that she had carried on 3 different space missions. Ryan Park sat at a portable keyboard that they had found in storage. Okay, people, Sullivan said. I'm not a musician, but I know we need to work together. Lisa, what kind of music do the aliens expect? Perfect mathematical harmony, every note precisely calculated. No emotion, no improvisation, no mistakes. Tony laughed, but there was no humor in it. Captain, that's not music. That's just math. With sound. Maybe that's our advantage, Maya said quietly. They've forgotten that music is supposed to make you feel something. Claire played a few notes on her violin, a simple melody that reminded everyone of home. When I play, I'm not thinking about mathematics. I'm thinking about my grandmother, about the song she used to sing to me. That's it, Amy said suddenly. That's what we need to show them. Music isn't just about technical perfection. It's about connection, emotion, the things that make life worth living. Over the next several hours, the small group began to work together. At first, it was rough. Claire's classical training clashed with Tony's jazz improvisation. Maya's folk Guitar didn't seem to fit with Ryan's keyboard. But slowly, something began to happen. They started listening to each other. Really listening. Tony would hear a melody that Claire was playing and find a harmony that supported it without overwhelming it. Maya would find a rhythm that gave Ryan's keyboard playing more life. Ryan would create a foundation that let the others build something beautiful on top. It wasn't perfect. There were mistakes, rough spots, moments when they had to stop and try again, but it was alive in a way that the alien music wasn't. "This is what we'll show them," Sullivan said as he listened. "Not perfection, but something better. Music that comes from the heart." As the harmony maker ships began to arrive for the trials, the human musicians continued to practice. They didn't know if their music would save them or doom them. But they knew one thing for certain. They would face the test as humans, playing human music together. The countdown to the Resonance trials had begun. Back on Earth, alarms were ringing in the Global Defense Council headquarters in Geneva. General Patricia Stone stood in the war room, staring at the huge screen that showed the position of the Aurora Dawn surrounded by alien ships. The message from Captain Sullivan had arrived just 2 hours ago, and it had turned the entire planet upside down. 17 civilizations destroyed, she said to the room full of officials. And now they want to test us with music. Dr. Robert Hayes, Chief Science Advisor, was reading through Lisa Martinez's reports. "General, this isn't just about one ship anymore. If the Aurora Dawn fails this test, these aliens might come to Earth next. We need to prepare for the worst." "What kind of preparation do you do for a musical test?" asked Secretary of Defense. Linda Foster, "Send them our best orchestra?" "Actually," said Dr. Hayes, "that might not be a bad idea." But according to Dr. Martinez's reports, these aliens don't just want technical perfection. They want to see what makes human music special. "General," Stone was already thinking ahead, "get me a list of the best musicians on Earth, not just classical players. I want jazz, rock, folk, everything. If this is about showing what makes human music different, then we need to show them all of it." 3 hours later, Maya Johnson was playing her violin on a street corner in New York City when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it because she was in the middle of a particularly good day. People were stopping to listen, dropping money in her case, and she was playing with Daniele Vitale, a saxophone player who often joined her performances. "Maya Johnson?" The voice on the phone said. "Yeah, that's me. But I'm working right now. So whatever you're selling..." "Miss Johnson, this is General Patricia Stone with the Global Defense Council. I need you to stop what you're doing and listen very carefully. The future of humanity might depend on your music." Maya almost hung up, thinking it was a prank call. But something in the woman's voice made her keep listening. 20 minutes later, Maya was sitting in the back of a military car, still holding her violin case, trying to understand what was happening. Danny had insisted on coming with her after hearing the unbelievable story. They were being taken to a secret facility where Earth's best musicians were being gathered for the most important concert in human history. At the same time, in Chicago, Tony Williams was closing up the small jazz club where he played every weekend. He had just finished a late set, and his saxophone was still warm in his hands when the government agents found him. "Mr. Williams, we need your help," one of them said. "It's a matter of national security." "What does national security have to do with jazz?" Tony asked. "Everything, sir. We'll explain on the way." In Los Angeles, Helen Rodriguez was practicing piano in her apartment when the knock came at her door. She had been preparing for a classical concert next week, working on a piece by Mozart. That required perfect timing and precision. She had no idea that her classical training would soon be needed to save her species all across the world. Musicians were being contacted, not just the famous ones, but street performers, club players, church organists, school band teachers, anyone who could play an instrument and understood that music was more than just notes on a page. By the end of the day, over 200 musicians had been brought to the secret facility in Nevada. The place looked like a cross between a military base and a recording studio. There were practice rooms, concert halls, and enough musical equipment to supply a dozen orchestras. General Stone addressed a confused group of musicians. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this seems crazy, but Earth has made contact with an alien species. They judge other civilizations based on their musical abilities. If we fail their tests, they will destroy us. We need to show them what human music can do." The musicians looked at each other in disbelief. Maya raised her hand. "General, are you saying that aliens are going to judge the entire human race based on how well we play music?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And according to our experts, these aliens have perfect technical ability, but they don't understand the emotional side of music. That's what makes human music different." Dr. Hayes stepped forward with a tablet in his hands. "We've been analyzing the alien communications. Their music is mathematically perfect, but it lacks something that all human music has: heart, feeling, the ability to make people stop what they're doing and really listen." Daniele Vitale, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "So you want us to play with feeling?" "That's what Maya and I do every day on the streets. People don't stop and listen to perfect music. They stop for music that touches them." "Exactly. But we also need technical skill. These aliens respect musical ability. We need to show them that human music can be both skilled and emotional." Over the next several hours, the musicians were divided into groups. The classical players worked with the jazz musicians. The rock guitarists learned from the folk singers. The street performers shared techniques with the symphony players. It was chaotic at first. Helen Rodriguez, with her years of classical training, couldn't understand why the jazz players changed the melodies as they played. Tony Williams couldn't figure out why the classical players were so rigid about following the written music exactly. But Maya, who had learned music on the streets, began to see connections. "Helen, play that Mozart piece you were practicing," she said during one of their sessions. Helen played the piece perfectly, every note exactly as written. It was beautiful and technically flawless. "Now, Tony, play something over it. Don't change Helen's melody, just find harmony that fits." Tony listened to the classical piece and began to play his saxophone, finding spaces in the melody where his jazz training could add color without overwhelming Helen's precision. The result was something neither could have created alone. "That's it," said Dr. Hayes, who had been listening. "That's what human music does that alien music doesn't. We build on each other. We make each other better." As the musicians continued to work together, something magical began to happen. The country singer learned that her simple melodies could carry classical harmonies. The rock drummer discovered that jazz rhythms could make his beats more interesting. The church organist found that folk songs could be just as spiritual as hymns. Maya found herself working closely with Danny, just like they did on the streets, but now their simple violin and saxophone combination was being supported by full orchestras, jazz bands, and everything in between. "You know what's funny?" Maya said to Danny during a break. "We've been doing this all along. Every time we play on the street, we're showing people that different sounds can work together. We just never knew the whole world was watching." General Stone received regular updates from the Aurora Dawn. The alien trial was still hours away, but Earth's musicians were discovering something important. Human music wasn't just about individual talent. It was about the magic that happened when different people brought their different gifts together. As the Earth musicians prepared their response to the alien challenge, they had no way of knowing that their colleagues in space were learning the same lesson. Music wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. The test of humanity was about to begin, and the answer might be found in the simple truth that every street musician knew. The best music happens when people play together. The crystalline amphitheater appeared around the Aurora Dawn like a dream made of light and sound. Captain Sullivan watched through the main screen as massive alien ships moved into position, creating a perfect circle around the human vessel. Each ship was different, representing the various species that had either passed or failed the resonance trials over the centuries. My God, whispered Dr. Amy Chun. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The amphitheater was enormous, easily 10 miles across, made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The Aurora Dawn sat in the center like a tiny metal bug surrounded by giants, but the most amazing thing was the sound. Even through the ship's hull, they could hear the harmony of dozens of alien species, all singing in perfect unison. Lisa Martinez was at her communication station, her face pale but determined. Captain, Velthara is explaining the trial structure. There are 3 tests, and we have to pass all 3 to survive. Tell me, Sullivan said. First is perfect mimicry. They'll play a complex piece of music, and we have to copy it exactly. No mistakes, no changes, no personal interpretation. Just perfect reproduction. Tony Williams, who was standing with the other musicians, shook his head. That's not music. That's just copying. The second test is harmonic mathematics, Lisa continued. They give us a mathematical formula, and we have to turn it into music. That follows the formula perfectly. No creativity, just pure mathematical harmony. Maya Johnson tightened her grip on her violin. And the third test? The fusion test. We have to take our music and blend it perfectly with theirs, but without changing their harmonies at all. We have to become part of their system. Dr. Claire Thompson looked around at her fellow musicians. So we either copy them perfectly, or we fail and die. That's what happened to the other species, Amy said. The ones that survived gave up their own musical traditions completely. They became just another voice in the alien chorus. Sullivan studied the alien ships surrounding them. Each one was beautiful, but they all looked similar now, as if they had lost their individual character. How long do we have to prepare? The trials begin now, Lisa said, as new sounds filled the communication system. Velthara's voice came through the speakers, translated by Lisa's computer. Beings of the noise-making species, prepare for the first trial. You will hear the song of beginning, which has been sung unchanged for 3,000 cycles. You must reproduce it with perfect accuracy. Failure means removal from the harmony of existence. The alien music began. It was incredibly complex, with mathematical precision that hurt to think about. Every note was exactly where it should be, every harmony perfectly calculated. It was technically perfect, but somehow cold and empty. The human musicians listened in silence for 10 minutes as the aliens played their ancient song. When it ended, the amphitheater fell quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. Now you must play, Velthara announced. Claire stepped forward with her violin. Her classical training had taught her to play music exactly as written, without adding her own interpretation. If anyone could copy the alien song perfectly, it would be her. She began to play, her fingers finding the exact notes the aliens had used. Her training took over, and she reproduced the mathematical harmonies with impressive precision. Tony joined her with his saxophone, using his technical skill to match the alien rhythms. Maya added her violin, and Ryan played the harmony on his keyboard. For 20 minutes, the humans played the alien song. It was technically excellent, nearly perfect. But something was wrong. As they played, Lisa noticed that some of the alien ships were moving restlessly, as if the music was making them uncomfortable. When the humans finished, there was a long silence. Then Velthara spoke, and her translated voice sounded confused. The reproduction is accurate, but there is something wrong with your harmony. You have added elements that do not belong in the song of beginning. Lisa quickly asked what was wrong. The answer made her stomach drop. They can hear emotion in our playing, she told the others. Even when we try to copy their music exactly, our humanity shows through. They think we're contaminating their pure harmonies. What does that mean? Sullivan asked. It means we failed the first test. But Velthara says they will allow us to continue to the second test, because they're curious about this contamination. The second test began immediately. The aliens transmitted a complex mathematical formula, and the humans had to turn it into music. Maya looked at the numbers on Lisa's screen and felt lost. She was a street musician, not a mathematician, but Tony had studied music theory in college. "I can work with this," he said. "It's like turning a recipe into a song." Working together, the musicians translated the mathematical formula into notes. It should have been pure, emotionless math music. But again, their humanity crept in. Ryan's keyboard work added subtle warmth to the cold calculations. Claire's violin made the mathematical progression somehow beautiful. Maya's guitar found rhythms that made the numbers feel alive. When they finished playing, the alien response was even more confused. The music was mathematically correct, but it was also somehow more than math. It was music that made you feel something even when it was based on pure numbers. "Velthara says we passed the mathematical accuracy test," Lisa reported. "But she's troubled by what she calls unnecessary additions to the harmony. She's never encountered anything like it." The third test was the most dangerous. The aliens began playing one of their standard pieces, and the humans were supposed to join in without changing anything about the alien harmony. They were supposed to disappear into the perfect alien music, but the humans couldn't do it. Every time Maya tried to play exactly like the aliens, her violin sang with the memory of playing on street corners, of making people smile and drop coins in her case. When Tony played his saxophone, it carried the soul of jazz clubs and late night sessions. Claire's violin remembered grandmother's lullabies, and Ryan's keyboard held the echo of church hymns and school concerts. Instead of disappearing into the alien harmony, the human music stood out. It was still technically correct, still followed the alien rules, but it was unmistakably human. It had heart, soul, the messy, beautiful complexity of beings who had learned music not from mathematical formulas, but from each other, the aliens. "Stop playing." The amphitheater fell silent, except for the sound of human music continuing alone in the vast space. When the humans finally stopped, Velthara's voice came through the communication system. But this time, she wasn't speaking to them in the formal language of the trials. She was asking a question that had never been asked before in 3,000 years of testing. What is this thing you add to harmony? This element that makes mathematics feel alive? We have never encountered music that follows our rules but refuses to become our music. Lisa looked around at her fellow humans, all of them exhausted but still holding their instruments. They had failed the test as designed, but somehow they had done something the aliens had never seen before. They had stayed human while playing alien music. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the harmony makers were curious instead of certain. The real test was just beginning. Maya Johnson looked around at her fellow musicians in the silence that followed Velthara's question. The crystal amphitheater pulsed with soft light, and the alien ships waited motionless around them. For the first time since the trials began, the aliens seemed uncertain. "What do we tell them?" Tony Williams whispered, his saxophone still warm in his hands. Captain Sullivan stepped forward. "We tell them the truth. Lisa, ask Velthara if we can show them something instead of just explaining it." Lisa worked quickly at her communication station. After a few minutes of musical conversation with the alien leader, she turned back to the group. "Velthara is curious. She says no species has ever asked to demonstrate something during the trials. But she's willing to listen." "Good," Sullivan said. "Maya, I want you to do what you do best. Play like you're on a street corner, trying to make people stop and listen." Maya felt nervous. This was so different from playing on the streets of New York, where the worst thing that could happen was that people would walk by without dropping coins in her case. Here, if she failed, her entire species might die. But then she remembered what her grandmother had always told her. Music isn't about perfection, child. It's about sharing your heart with other hearts. Maya lifted her violin and began to play. Not the complex mathematical harmonies of the aliens, and not a perfect copy of their ancient songs. She played a simple melody that she had learned as a child, a folk song that her grandmother used to sing while cooking dinner. The melody was sad and sweet at the same time. The kind of music that made you think of home and family and all the things that mattered most in life. It wasn't mathematically perfect, and it certainly wasn't technically complex. But it was real as Maya played. Something unexpected happened. Claire Thompson found herself lifting her violin and adding a harmony. Not because she had been told to, not because it was written in some musical score, but because the melody called out for harmony and her heart answered. Tony joined in next, his saxophone finding a place in the song that supported Maya's melody without overwhelming it. His jazz training helped him weave around the violin parts, adding color and depth. Ryan's keyboard came last, providing a gentle foundation that held everything together. The four humans weren't following any written music. They were listening to each other and responding, building something together that none of them could have created alone. As the simple song filled the crystal amphitheater, something amazing began to happen. The alien vessels started to move, not in formation like before, but restlessly, as if the music was stirring something inside them that had been sleeping for a very long time. Through the communication system, Lisa could hear the aliens talking to each other in their harmonic language. But their perfect harmonies were becoming less perfect. Individual voices were starting to stand out from the collective sound. Maya's song came to an end, but instead of silence, something extraordinary happened. One of the alien ships began to play music, but it wasn't the standard harmony maker. Music, it was something older, sadder, more personal. "Lisa," Captain Sullivan said urgently, "what are they playing?" Lisa was working frantically to translate the alien music. "Captain, I think it's their original music. The music they played before they joined the harmony makers." More alien ships began to join in. Each one played something different, something that sounded like memories. The perfect mathematical harmony of the harmony makers was breaking apart as individual species remembered their own musical voices. Velthara's ship was the only one still silent. Through the communication system, her translated voice sounded shaken. "What have you done to them?" "They are abandoning perfect harmony. They are choosing discord." Maya stepped closer to Lisa's communication station. "Tell her it's not discord. Tell her it's music the way it's supposed to be. Different voices coming together, not to become the same, but to make something beautiful together." Lisa translated Maya's words, and Velthara's response came back immediately. "This is impossible. Unity requires uniformity. Harmony demands that all voices blend into one perfect sound." "No," said Maya, and she began to play again. This time, she played a melody and then looked at Velthara's ship. "Join us, not by copying our music, but by adding your voice to ours." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Velthara's ship began to produce music. It was traditional harmony maker music, mathematically perfect and emotionally cold. But Maya didn't try to copy it or change it. Instead, she found ways to weave her violin around the alien harmonies, supporting them while remaining distinctly human. Claire joined in, her classical training helping her find places where human harmony could complement alien mathematics. Tony's saxophone added warmth to the cold perfection, while Ryan's keyboard created bridges between human emotion and alien logic. The result was unlike anything that had ever been heard in the galaxy. It was music that was both human and alien, both emotional and mathematical, both individual and unified. It was the sound of different species working together without losing what made them unique. As the music filled the amphitheater, other alien ships began to add their own voices. Not the standardized harmony maker music, but the half-remembered songs of their own cultures, supported and enhanced by the human musicians who seemed to understand instinctively how to make different sounds work together. Dr. Amy Chin, who had been listening in amazement, turned to Captain Sullivan. "Captain, they're crying." "What?" "The aliens. Look at the readings Lisa's getting from their ships. The biometric data shows emotional responses we've never seen from them before. I think they're remembering what music used to mean to them. Through the communication system, Velthara's voice came again, but this time it was different. The perfect mathematical precision was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like wonder. I feel something I have not felt in 3,000 cycles, she said. When I was young, before I became a harmony maker, I used to sing songs that my parent unit taught me. Simple songs, imperfect songs. I had forgotten them completely until now. Maya smiled and played her violin more softly, leaving space for Velthara to continue. I do not understand how your music can be technically flawed and yet more beautiful than our perfect harmonies. I do not understand how different voices can create unity without uniformity. But I feel something when I listen to your music that I have not felt since I was young. What do you feel? Lisa asked through the communication system. There was a long pause before Velthara answered. Joy? I feel joy. The music in the amphitheater grew stronger as more and more alien ships remembered their original voices. Species that had been silent for centuries began to sing their own songs again, supported by the human musicians who seemed to understand that the best harmony came not from everyone playing the same notes, but from everyone playing their own notes in a way that made the whole song more beautiful. For the first time in 3,000 years, the resonance trials had produced something new, not the destruction of a species that couldn't achieve perfect harmony, and not the assimilation of a species into harmony maker uniformity. Instead, they had created something that none of them had imagined possible. They had created music that celebrated difference instead of eliminating it. And in that music, every species found something they had lost long ago. The joy of being themselves while still being part of something larger. The trial was over, but the real music was just beginning. 6 months after the resonance trials, Maya Johnson stood on the observation deck of the newly built Harmony Station, watching ships from dozens of different worlds arrive for the first Galactic Music Festival. The space station orbited a beautiful blue star, and it had been designed with input from every species in what was now called the New Harmony Alliance. Hard to believe it all started with a street performance, said Daniele Vitale, walking up. Beside her with his saxophone case in hand. He had been one of the first musicians from Earth to join the Interspecies Music Academy that Maya had founded. Maya smiled, still holding the same violin that had helped change galactic civilization. Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. Through the large windows, they could see the incredible variety of ships approaching the station. The Zephyrian vessels still looked like crystal cathedrals, but now they pulsed with colors that changed with the music their crews were playing. The Thrakari ships from the volcanic worlds glowed red and orange, and the sound of their percussion music could be felt through the station's hull, even in the vacuum of space. Ms. Johnson, called a young voice from behind him. Maya turned to see a group of students from the academy approaching. They were an amazing sight. Human children playing alongside young aliens whose species had been silent for centuries, all of them carrying instruments and chattering excitedly in a mixture of languages. Are you ready for tonight's performance? Asked Kella, a young Zephyrian whose crystalline features sparkled with excitement. She was learning to play human violin, while her human friend Sam was learning the crystal harmonics of Zephyrian music. We've been practicing the new piece you taught us, added Vorth, a small Thrakari whose rocky skin glowed softly as he spoke. The one where everyone plays their traditional melody at the same time, but they all fit together. Maya knelt down to the children's level. And how does it sound? Beautiful, said Sam, a human boy from Mars Colony. At first it sounded like chaos, but when we really listened to each other, it became like a musical rainbow. Danny laughed. A musical rainbow. I like that. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the station's communication system. All personnel, please prepare for the arrival of the Harmony Council. This is a historic moment for galactic civilization. Maya and Danny made their way to the main concert hall. a massive space that had been designed to accommodate thousands of beings from different worlds. The acoustics were perfect, but more importantly, the hall had been built to make everyone feel welcome, no matter what they looked like or what kind of music they played. In the center of the hall, a special platform had been prepared for tonight's ceremony. Velthara was already there, but she looked very different from the rigid harmony maker who had first tested humanity 6 months ago. Her crystalline form now pulsed with warm colors, and when she spoke, her voice carried emotional tones that would have been impossible under the old system. "Friends of many worlds," Velthara began. Her words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. 6 months ago, a small group of humans showed us something we had forgotten. They reminded us that music is not about perfection. It is about connection. The audience, filled with beings from across the galaxy, listened quietly. Many of them were species that had been forced to abandon their own music centuries ago. Others were species that had been destroyed for failing the old trials, their survivors now free to rebuild their cultures. Today, we established the harmony protocol, Velthara continued. Not a system of trials and judgment, but a promise. A promise that every species, every culture, every individual voice has value. A promise that we will create music together without forcing anyone to become something they are not. Dr. Amy Chun, now serving as the Academy's cultural director, stepped forward. The Harmony Protocol recognizes that true harmony comes from diversity, not uniformity. Each species brings their own musical traditions, their own instruments, their own way of understanding rhythm and melody. When we combine these different approaches, we create something more beautiful than any one species could create alone. The ceremony began with each species performing a piece of their traditional music. The Corelli sang with voices that sounded like wind through crystal caves. The Vaxari played instruments that used light instead of sound. The Mindari created rhythms with their multiple arms that human drummers could never replicate. But the real magic happened when Maya stepped forward with her violin and began to play. She started with the same simple folk melody that had started everything during the trials. One by one, representatives from each species joined in, not copying her melody, but finding ways to add their own musical traditions to the growing song. The result was incredible. It was music that no single species could have imagined, let alone created. Human violins wove together with Zephyrian crystal harmonics. Drakari percussion provided foundation for Mindari rhythmic complexity. Corelli voices added ethereal beauty to Vaxari-like music. Dr. Claire Thompson, now teaching classical music to students from 12 different worlds, played her violin alongside Maya. Tony Williams' saxophone found perfect harmony with Alien, one instruments that didn't even use air to create sound. Ryan Park's keyboard work provided a bridge between human musical scales and the mathematical harmonies that some species preferred. As the music filled the concert hall, something magical happened. The different melodies and rhythms didn't clash or compete. Instead, they supported each other, creating layers of beauty that grew richer and more complex with each voice that joined in. In the audience, children from different worlds listened with wonder. They were the first generation to grow up in a galaxy where musical diversity was celebrated instead of suppressed. They would never know a time when species were forced to choose between their cultural identity and their survival. "Look at them," Danny whispered to Maya as they played. "The kids don't care what species they're sitting next to. They just hear the music." Maya smiled without missing a note. In the audience, she could see human children sitting next to young Zephyrians, Drakari. Youngsters tapping along with Mindari rhythm students. They were all listening to the same music, but each of them was hearing it through the filter of their own cultural background. And somehow that made it more beautiful. Not less. The performance lasted for 2 hours, with more and more musicians joining in as the evening progressed. By the end, over 1,000 beings from 50 different worlds were playing together, creating a symphony that spanned the galaxy. When the music finally ended, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Velthara stepped Forward again, her crystalline form now glowing with colors that had never been seen in Harmony Maker technology before. The old trials are ended forever. In their place, we begin a new tradition. Every year we will gather like this, not to judge or test, but to share and learn and create together. She turned to Maya, who was still holding her violin. The humans taught us that the most beautiful music comes from the heart, not from mathematical formulas. They showed us that different voices can create unity without uniformity. Maya looked out at the incredible assembly of beings from across the galaxy. Music was always meant to bring people together, not drive them apart. It doesn't matter what world you come from or what you look like. When we play together, when we really listen to each other, we're all part of the same song. The first Galactic Music Festival ended, but it was really just the beginning. Over the following years, the Harmony Protocol would transform galactic civilization. Wars that had lasted centuries ended when enemy species discovered they could create beautiful music together. Trade agreements were negotiated through musical collaboration. Even the most difficult diplomatic problems were solved when delegates sat down with instruments instead of weapons. Maya continued to teach at the academy, showing beings from across the galaxy that the secret to great music wasn't technical perfection or mathematical precision. It was the willingness to listen to others, to find ways to make different voices work together, and to remember that music was about joy, connection, and the celebration of life itself. And sometimes, when she was alone in her quarters at night, Maya would play her violin and think about those early days performing on street corners with Danny. They had been trying to make people stop and listen, to bring a little beauty into their everyday lives. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Now the whole galaxy was listening, and the music would never stop.